The two ladies in the back are not really ostracized, but they're here as auditors today, so.
As auditors?
Well, I suggested that.
Not in the accounting
Speaking
sense.
English, this is.
Since auditors comes from the Latin, so.
Sure.
Anyway.
Auditorium. Idea of the bull.
In any case, we didn't have time to talk about that. They were simply here when I arrived to audit.
Where's my auditor?
For some mice. Paul, do you want to say a few words, or have you those forms that you were talking about?
Well, the forums basically ask you to release all rights to the university to do what it wants with the videotape. And no one's forced to sign the form, but we hope everyone will, so that we don't have to worry about whether or not you'll be in the picture. If you don't want to sign the form, you're free to, and we'll make sure you're not in the picture. Any questions you ask are cut out of the tape. I'll bring some forms either later tonight or at the next class.
You didn't come here to listen to me, so I shall sit down and simply say, Stafford, welcome.
Thank you.
It's good that you're here.
Yeah. Well, friends, I'm not too happy about sitting in chairs and things. I hope you can accept this kind of informality, because it is how I operate. And I don't see much good reason for doing anything else. I don't know if you do. Who knows what an oxymoron is? Come on, Laura.
Mine just went blank. This is what happens when I'm on camera. It's weird. It sounds like one and is another, isn't it? It's like bittersweet. Contradiction in terms within the...
I love this usage, you know, and you may have noticed, some of you have read, I know some of you have read my stuff. The liberty machine is an oxymoron, you know. Designing freedom is an oxymoron. Well, this is a self-organizing system where it turns out that I'm doing organizing, you see, and that's an oxymoron too. I'm very interested in self-organizing systems, and I want to suggest to you that we try and make this course a self-organizing system, thereby showing that we can be adaptive, because I believe that the main thing we have to learn from systems theory is, and all the stuff we generally talk about, social systems especially, we have to begin to understand what counts as adaptation to change, because it's the thing that's going to screw the entire species, in my opinion. You could all make a case for that. So, let us suppose we're going to be a self-organizing system. Then the oxymoron component in that is that somehow or another, a self-organizing system, it turns out, has to gel. And that's really how I see my role, not as the master teacher, but as someone who has been through a few of these things and is trying to act in that capacity. I suppose the simplest example of a self-organizing system is indeed a supersaturated solution to which you drop a crystal and then it goes thunk. But without the crystal, it doesn't go thunk. And that says to us, well, perhaps the self-organization is implicit in the system anyway. Now, here we have a group of friends. I have no idea to what extent you are friends or are interrelated, and I want to explore that a bit in a minute, if I may, for practical purposes. But whatever relationships there are already in this room, then these are part of what is implicit in any self-organization that emerges. I wanted to say that first. The second thing I wanted to say is that I am particularly interested, as you may know, in a class of system which I call the viable system, which is, I think, of special interest to everyone here, because interview is a viable system, and any social system we discuss is presumably intended to be a viable system, if it isn't. Now, what exactly does that mean? That also has a few little traps in it. See, the dictionary says that a viable system is one capable of independent existence. And of course, the proper provenance of the word viable is from eugenics, from obstetrics, let's say, from from the notion of when the fetus becomes capable of independent existence. That is the definition. I would like you to remember that that is the definition. Capable of independent existence. But where it's trappy, where it's rather difficult to lay on this, is that, see, that's a relative statement, although it appears to be a flat statement. Because nothing can be so isolated that it is capable of independent existence. Even this fetus we mentioned, if you withdraw the oxygen from the ambience, of course the fetus collapses. And this does not, however, stop us from saying, well, this is a viable system. In other words, the self-organizing system, okay, we said a little bit about that, is placed in an ambience where it is relatively able to exist on its own. Now, of course, this relativity is going to turn out to be very important to any scholarly study, or indeed any actual practical understanding of the business. Clearly, it involves the drawing of definitions of boundaries. Now, this is the thing that systems people ought to live with like a cross on their backs, and so very often forget to entertain at all. That the boundaries of the system are crucial to the behavior of the system, and crucial, therefore, to the way the system is observed by the participants in the system. And I'm asking you, you notice I'm gradually building the notion that I'm asking you to regard this room full of people as a viable system, as well as a self-organizing system. Where are the boundaries here? Where are the subsystems here? These are all the kinds of questions that arise. Would you be a viable system if it were not for this course? Is the course somehow the viable system in which this viable system is embedded? These are the kinds of things that begin to emerge. Now, I said all that without, although I wanted you to talk, and I said I did, I said all that first to give you some crystal dropping into the supersaturated solution notion of what I think it is we ought to be doing. I would like us to study the notion of a viable system. And I have a lot of input to make to that from the theoretical work that I've done and the practical work that I've done and so forth. But I personally think, and this is your field more than mine, however, I will plunge, that learning is a process that only you can engage in. It's not something that I can engage in on your behalf. So although I have these inputs to make, I think that you yourselves should be actually doing the work. And I would like, before we close this afternoon, to see if we cannot find a structure in this room that we can work on as a kind of experimental laboratory for the rest of the course. Now, that's not really clear what I mean by that yet, but I will try and make it clear. So the first thing that I would like to do, with your agreement, is the obvious thing of asking you to introduce yourselves to me, and insofar as that's necessary, to each other. But I've said all this first, instead of saying, well, the first thing let's do is find out who everybody is. I said all this because I would like you to go fairly cautiously into this. See, it isn't terribly interesting to know how old you are, or whether you come from Prince Edward Island or something. What is of interest in the context of this is where is your state of viability vis-a-vis other people's viability? And where do you see yourself as part of a self-organizing system? Whether we are talking about, for instance, your family, or for instance, your class, or for instance, this university, or as Canadians, if you all are, or what the hell? See, we have to observe that we are making the rules as we go along, whether we like it or not, is what I'm trying to say to you. And that is a very interesting thing, because once the rules are set up, they're very, very hard to alter. And if you typify yourself as something, in answer to my question, would you mind introducing yourself, Richard? Then it sticks. Just as the shape of this room sticks, which is why I was making such a damn fuss about how we should be arranged. Once I'm set up on a podium as a teacher of a lot of people sitting in desks, We are stuck with that, and it's very, very difficult to change. Now, these are all lessons about the way systems really work in human affairs, I think. Well, I feel I probably said enough to ask whether, why don't you say, Richard, who you are? I'm picking on you because you're one of the people whose names I know. Does everybody know you? Do you know everyone?
Pretty well.
So what are you going to say about yourself?
Well, I'm Richard Schmid. I'm here because I'm curious to know something about systems to help you to understand and organize the environment better. I don't know exactly what I'll learn. You raised the issue of learning, but that's the exciting part about learning, discovering what there is there to be learned. And so really who I am is a curious person.
That's nice. It's highly ambiguous too. Yes, well, thank you very much. Who would like to follow that? Anybody see themselves as liaising with that? Because I want to get everybody in anyway, so.
Why don't I come in at the opposite end?
Good.
I'd like to get into education and training in industry.
You are who?
I'm Susan Francis. And I have worked in industry before and taken some management training programs, and that's why I got interested in this. But I could never be so impractical with this, I was just curious.
You see how it's crystallizing? That's nice. Thank you. Who's next? We're being cautious. Recognizably, you see, because I am too, before I went inside meetings. My model of the thing you're just talking about kind of invades the issue that worries a lot of philosophers. If you take those as being a number of actual systems that you have managed to identify and declare that you know about, they're all distinct, like a beehive or medicine hat, the railway system, you know, just a whole collection of stuff. Now, when cyberneticians get active with systems, and in the way you've been talking about, they tend to start skipping between them. And then people say, geez, this fellow's drawing analogies, hold tight, you know, put the brakes on, because who knows where this will end. And who indeed? Well, I do, you see, is my claim. Because if you drop these systems down, and this is how my model this looks. Well, these are any kind of system you like, and you have now formalized them enough, even in your head, to declare that there are analogies between them. You have embarked on a process which may or may not be dangerous and let's stop and all that. So let's suppose we decide to go on with this quite clear-headed. Now, what John Stuart Mill would do at this point is go on to isolate the logical structures of those systems, and about this point you could start talking, if that's analogy, you could start talking about some kind of, let us just call it rigorous analogy, right? And this is where Mill and that kind of thinking would apply, but then we go on harder. And let us say, well, we have a whole lot of mathematical apparatus at our beck and call as scientists, and it turns out if there are characteristics here which will turn up here which are very, very strongly related. And at this point we can begin to talk perhaps about, and it depends whether we can succeed in this or not in any given case, we may begin to talk about what I should call homomorphs. Now, this is not only rigor, but a very particular kind of rigor whereby we can map under certain mathematical and distinct constraints, we can map these things onto each other. So now we're getting very excited, and we may be able to take what I regard then as the final step, which is the isomorph, which says, out of all the characteristics of these things, we have isolated, for instance, this thing, and we have found it to be invariant in all these systems. Now, for instance, if you take the now I'm trying to pick on something before we've got off the ground, even that everybody would know about. You know that entropy grows. Entropy tends to increase. Now, that is the sort of thing that you are likely to discover here about all these systems, even though you started with independent observations and by drawing analogies and coming down this trip. Well, I think that is a very powerful model which with a bit of luck is going to escape endless discussion of the kind of problems that you correctly raise. What it says in a nutshell is there are mathematically invariant features of this kind of system, in my case, the viable system. And if we can bring it home that there are mathematically invariant features of the viable system, then we know something instantly about their design. We have something on offer to somebody who says, I have to set up a medical program in Zaire, you know, what can you tell me? Well, I've never been to Zaire, but I can start telling him things because of this, if I've discovered anything that is indeed invariant. So, I just thought I'd shove that one in, because it's quite important from the word go, in my opinion, with this field, to begin to get at ease with this kind of methodology. Otherwise, you feel at all points that you are on shifting sand and maybe are indulging in literary devices and so on. Or you go off down to the other extreme and get embedded in a massive epistemological. Now, I take the fact that we don't get a cure for cancer and that we don't know how to avoid war and we can't feed the undernourished as clear evidence that we've got the wrong paradigm. It means looking at everything in a different way. Sorry, you want to say something?
In terms of the cure for cancer kind of example, though, it seems to me that a lot of the systems that are set up are, if they found a quote-unquote cure for cancer tomorrow, there'd be a lot of people out of work.
Right.
So you get the kinds of systems which get set up to a point that if they accomplish their goal, they would destroy themselves.
Isn't that what we should all do? You know, if we're good trainers, we should eventually set up a system so that we wouldn't have to be there. I mean,
Yeah, but that's a very, you're asking, that's counter to the whole idea of self-preservation, whether of an individual or any kind of viable system. So you have problems with...
You just said my opening words were, I don't know if you realize.
But that's the problem with something like that they may not have the right, may not be the wrong paradigm, but their aim really may not be to find a cure for cancer.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we shall encounter all this in terms of autopoietic systems, which are systems that exist to produce themselves, and we're absolutely covered in them. And they're not there to do what they're ostensibly there for. However, let's not carry that too far down the line. We're establishing just a little bit of dialogue, starting with you. And as to this business, you see, of whether facetious, humorous, serious, or anything else, my dear sir, it seems to me that to set out to find a new way of thinking is a jolly good idea for absolutely everybody all the time, because the ways we've got aren't very workable. QED, you know, I mean, you just look around you. So I do think we are into a business of changing paradigms, and one of the reasons, let me say then, at this point, that I think that systems theory has not fulfilled its promise of cybernetics of, let's say, 30 years ago, when a lot of people, myself, for instance, a very young enthusiast, thought that he was going to do all these things, is that, you know, people have assimilated a word like systems into their paradigm with the greatest conceivable ease. They say, yeah, I know about systems. To an office manager, the system is whether you send a pink flimsy to him and a purple one to her, you know. To a man about town, the system is his method of backing horses, and so on. And everybody has this word flying around very conveniently, and it's all slotted into context, and everybody says, what was that? What happened? Nothing. See? Now, if we're going to focus on a concept of system which is really capable of changing the world, or at least capable of doing something powerful and valuable that is going to justify your time in, say, taking 12 days, 12 sessions off to talk with me, then it's got to be something that is paradigmatically threatening. And we better look at it in that light from the start. Still feeling with us, or facetious? Or
So far, so good.
so far, so good. Who we got left?